Now let's dive a little deeper into understanding how the loops actually work. A loop can be represented with the following pseudocode: while condition, that's the body of the loop, and then we have to end the loop. So now that we understand the high level structure of the loop, let's dive a little bit deeper into how they actually work. In order to understand how the loops work inside a programming language, so there are multiple steps involved in the evaluation of this loop. Every loop needs to have a variable that is called loop control variable. What it means is this variable controls whether the loop needs to be executed or exited. Okay, so based on this loop control variable, this condition is evaluated and the body is executed if it is true. Otherwise, the while loop or the loop is ended or exited. Now let's understand what steps need to be performed on this loop control variable so that the loop is executed. So there are basically three different steps the loop variable has to go through in order to implement this while loop. The first step is initialize loop control variable. Okay, so for example, we want to execute this body 10 times. Okay, so our situation says that we need to execute the body 10 times. In that case, our loop control variable could be just a simple counter which is initialized to 0 because that's the starting point of the loop. Step number 2 is evaluate condition. Okay, so the step number 2 is it evaluates the condition here. Now in our case of this counter example, the condition will be, let's say counter is less than 10 because we want to execute this loop 10 times, so 0 through 9. Okay, so as long as the counter is less than 10, the loop will be executed. In our case, since we initialize the counter to 0, so the next thing it will evaluate is 0 less than 10, which is true, so the body of the loop will be executed. And the third step is we have to update the counter, right, or change the variable somehow so that the next time it checks the condition, it's either true or false. Because if you don't change the variable, then this will become an infinite loop. Okay, it will always be executed and never exited. So in our case, step number 3 would be to update variable. Okay, which in our case is counter, so we say counter equals counter plus 1. In this step of our example, it will add 1 to 0 and store the result in the counter variable. So the counter variable will become 1. So now that the counter is updated and now its value is 1, it will go ahead and check step 2 again. In this case, 1 is less than 10, so the condition is true again. It will execute the body and update the counter again to 2. Come here, evaluate step 2, which is 2 is less than 10, is true, body is executed, counter is updated, and it keeps on going until the value of counter becomes 10. Okay, so when the value of counter is 10, it will come here and evaluate the condition, which is 10 is less than 10. This evaluates to false. So when this evaluates to false, the body will not be executed and it will exit the loop because the condition is evaluated to false. So let's go back to our roller coaster example and see how we can improve the code using the loop structure. So if you remember, we were accepting the user's age and printing the tickets 1000 times, and we have to duplicate the lines 1000 times. Now, in order to improve that code, we can say that the number of riders equals 1000. This is equivalent to step number 1, where we are initializing some variable. Okay. The next thing we do is we check the condition. So we say while number of riders is not equal to 0. So you can imagine we have a line of 1000 people standing, and we process the riders one by one. And as we are processing the riders, the line gets shorter. The ticket for the rider is printed. We now have 999 remaining riders, and we have less riders compared to before. So as long as we have riders in the queue, we will keep processing this while loop. So we check the condition. If the number of riders becomes 0, that means we have exhausted the line. And in that case, the while loop can exit, and because we don't need to print any more tickets. So looking here, we see that the condition is obviously true because we have 1000 riders and they're not equal to 0. So the condition evaluates to true. This fulfills step number 2. So what we need to do is we need to get user's age, right? These are the tasks that we need to repeat. So age equals input, and we say age. Okay. And then we go ahead and print ticket given the age. Now these are the 2 things we have to perform multiple times for each rider. So that's the body of our while loop, which consists of 2 statements, one to get the age and the other to print the ticket. Now once these 2 statements are done, we have to perform step 3, which is we have to update the variable somehow, right? So we say, now that we have processed one rider, we can say number of riders equals the current number of riders, which is 1000 in our case, minus 1. So we subtract 1 from 1000 and store the information in the number of riders variable. So now this variable contains 999, one less than 1000, because we have already processed the ticket for one rider. And the loop is executed. It checks if the number of riders is not equal to 0, asks for the age, prints the ticket, updates the variable, and repeats. When all the 1000 riders have been processed, the number of riders will become 0. It will go ahead. Now 0 is not equal to 0 is false. So it will exit this loop and it will end the program, okay, in our case. Or it can do other processing here, other things that it needs to do.